My name is Ashley, and this is Let's Talk Dispatch.
I do. You're gonna do it. Do it really well.
And I believe the world needs more dispatchers.
Around in the mud, blood, and beer.
Years that I'm not working 4th of July. 4th of July.
Hey, community policing, right? What about community dispatching?
So on this show, with the help of my guests, we will educate, empower, and support the heroes behind the headset.
Right.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode here on Let's Talk Dispatch with me, Ashley, the Raspy Dispatcher. Hopefully, everything is going well for you folks. Again, I'm going to keep saying this month. Heading into the holiday season is a weird time, especially for our callers. So remember to continue to give yourself grace as long as the folks that are calling us on 911. Hopefully, you have this next holiday off. I got to work Thanksgiving, but I do get Christmas off this year, which is awesome. But I know that's not the case for everyone. So if you are spending your holiday under the headset, you are appreciated. And check in on your people. It's a tough time of the year. Before we get into today's episode, let's hear from our sponsors. Today's episode of Let's Talk Dispatch is proudly sponsored by Prepared. Their mission is to be public safety's most assistive technology. Revolutionizing how we handle emergencies, Prepared is dedicated to saving more lives and making our communities safer. Learn more about how Prepared is transforming emergency response at prepared911.com. Our next sponsor is Zybex Media. Since 2020, Zybex has been creating impactful recruitment films for their customers. Zybex Media offers their expertise, providing a full range of media solutions designed to attract and retain talent for all PSAPs. Visit zybex.com/media to learn more. These partnerships help us continue to spread the message that the world needs more dispatchers. Interested in partnering with us? Head to theraspydispatcher.com. As always, thank you to our sponsors, and check them out if you haven't. They have amazing products for your 911 center. So today's guests, if you're tuning in, watching us via video on YouTube, might look familiar to you, but what you might not know is they have recently been promoted as a Fire Communications Supervisor and have a unique journey into the world of emergency services. From their beginnings as a fire explorer and Reserve Firefighter to dispatching for 5 years and now stepping into a leadership role, they bring a wealth of experience and insights that I'm super excited to talk about in today's episode. They've spoken at CalAPCO, sharing strategies on using humor and hobbies to combat burnout. My guest today, Josh. Hi, Josh.
Hey, how's it going, Ashley?
It's going well. It is my day off before my work week, so it's a good day for me.
Mine too, actually.
Yeah, you're a weekend guy?
Yeah, just newly promoted, so I got kicked back to the weekends.
It's the plus and minuses of, the different seniority bracket you're falling into now.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it's funny, you mentioned in your intro about the holidays being really hard, and this job can be hard with that in terms of the shift work. You work holidays, you work weekends, you work all these days. This is the first time in 5 years I have Christmas off. My kids are like super pumped.
They're hyped. They're like, man, we don't got to wait till end of shift.
Right? Yeah. There was plenty of times where it was like, guys, you got to wait till 7 p.m. when I get home or whatever.
Oh my gosh, which is such a reality in this line of work. It's something to consider if you're listening and thinking about applying to this job.
That's true.
But how did you get into dispatch, Josh? How did you find yourself here?
So it's funny. I was a fire explorer when I was a teenager. Really enjoyed that. Wanted to go into fire. At least I thought. I had a lot of family members who were firefighters, family friends, and things like that. And right out of high school, I started we had like a graphic design program in high school. And so I got into the Adobe suite and started doing stuff. This is before the Adobe suite is what it is now. It was a long time ago. But I started learning Photoshop and Illustrator and all these other cool things. And through that, a friend of mine who had graduated a year earlier came to me and he's like, hey, I gotta make this video for a project, right? And I was like, sure, I'll help you edit it. I had never done it before. So I just went ahead and did it. And he was like, wow, that was really good. That's way better. And so that led me into video production. So I started editing and then started just learning all the video production stuff to the point to where I was doing kind of everything, writing, shooting, directing, producing, all of these things I did it for 17 years. During that time, I also still was dreaming about being in fire, going into the field. I was a reserve firefighter for a while, and that was super fun. But just right around the time I was a reserve firefighter, my first child was born. And
kids, man, they ruin everything in the best way.
It was a very, like, my wife, I came home one day and she's like, we need to talk about all the things you're doing. And so I made the decision, and it was the right decision because I couldn't give my 100% to the reserve stuff. And it was super important. I didn't want to, risk being, not at the top of my game. And then so I continued on with video production for a long time. But what's interesting is, and I know like a lot of your podcasts and what you're trying to do is get people into dispatch. It's a great job. The problem I was having in creative work, and for those who may be in it who are watching this, people don't want to pay creatives. Never ever really, hey, I would freelance on the side too, and people would give me their jobs and bid them out, and then suddenly it's like, cool, my budget's $500, and I just quoted them, 10,000. So and even on the corporate end where I mostly sat, it was hard. Creatives wouldn't get the recognition or the pay. They're like, I can shoot that on my iPhone. And I'm like, well, technically, sure. So that led me to I kind of was trying to find a new job. It was in 2018, 2019. I was looking for new work, and I was applying at all these different places, and I knew the department near me that they had a pretty healthy, media side of things for social media and press conferences and all these other things. So I was like, ooh, that sounds cool. I like it. It takes kind of something I loved on the fire side, and I can still do creative work. And at the same time, I saw the flyer. I was going through governmentjobs.com, and I saw dispatch, and I was like, I bet I could do that. So I applied on a whim, and 6 months later I got into the academy.
Oh my gosh. And look at you now. I mean, you've gone through now stepping into the role as supervisor. I mean, you have the experience with fire reserve and, being a fire explorer. But then you step away from that for a good chunk of change. And then coming back in this new role, which I would imagine was probably not highlighted as much as it should have been through your fire explorer experience. Like, what was that shift like for you, flipping onto that side of the radio and seeing that new perspective into this field that you love, really?
Yeah. And that's actually interesting. When I was a fire explorer, I don't think we ever talked about dispatch, ever.
Right.
But I mean, we're 16-year-old kids. All we want to do is like, what can we climb and what can we cut? That was. And then I remember in my reserve academy, really, I think we did a tour of dispatch. And then we did some radio training. That was kind of the extent of it. This is how you talk on the radio, And then jumping into this, it was just interesting. I mean, I'm 41. I remember Rescue 911. That was a huge show when I was a kid. Loved watching that. And so I've heard over the years the 911 calls. I never thought I'd be on that end of it. One thing that has always, and I think this is just my personality, but also helped developed by being an explorer and being a reserve, was maintaining calm in stressful situations. And boy, do we get some stressful situations on the phone.
That's the truth.
And so I'm able to maintain that level of, just kind of keep it even keeled. And that definitely helped, but it was a learning curve. I came out of the creative world. The last place I worked before I went into dispatch was a racing team, and I was traveling over the country shooting cool stuff. And then suddenly I'm in a classroom again at the age of 36, um, writing and having to memorize every single resource and every station and where they are and what their capabilities are and all these things. And it flipped me on my head for a few minutes, you know?
I'm sure. One question I do get often is like, what's too old, air quotes, to start this career? And I'm like, I don't think there isn't too old, like hopefully if you're older and you're at a point of retirement, like don't come here.
Right.
But if you're genuinely like in your 30s looking for a job switch, looking for a change, like this is totally an awesome career that I think is manageable for most folks who know how to type. I think that's probably the basic qualification. Like if you can type and you're decent at typing, we can work with that.
That I would say typing is huge as
Yeah.
long as you could, 40 minutes, we're good. 40 words per minute, right?
Yeah.
Minimum. But yeah, the typing and like my department, we put you through a 6-week call taking academy before you hit the floor with your trainer, and then
Amazing.
a couple months of call taking, and the leash gets a little longer and a little longer. And then
Yes.
once you're signed off, then we put you back in another 2-week academy for radios and our primary dispatch and wildland training, because for where I'm at, the veg fires are a big deal.
Yeah. That's very
And
similar to my experience, minus the fire stuff, because I was only law enforcement, but call taking academy on the floor, crying every day while you figure it out, and then back into a shorter academy, and then on the floor to cry again. So
right, yeah, just when you think you have it figured out, then now you got to
exactly.
multitask. You have to answer the phone and your radio traffic at the same time.
Oh my gosh, no, seriously. I am at my first agency. We were split rooms, so call takers are on that side, radios on that side, and you can really focus on what you're like your one call, that's your focus until you're off of it. At my new agency, we're smaller, so if it's just me and my partner and that phone's ringing and I'm on radio, we're all on phones, so it's that split ear is a beast. It's really something I'm still continuing to get better at.
Yeah, and it still is that like room awareness, that the split ear. I like that. I'm going to use that because when I won't be training anymore as the supervisor, but I'm gonna utilize that. I think because
Heck yeah.
that describes it perfectly. And not to, I know a lot of people will watch this are prospective dispatchers or hopeful dispatchers.
Mhm.
I don't mean to scare anyone. It can be developed. It just takes time. Be patient with yourself.
Yeah, heck yeah. I mean, one thing we definitely want to do is get more dispatchers in these seats, but we also want to be real. Like this is a tough job. I don't think there is any job training process that's comparable to dispatch training, just because of the level of critiquing you're putting yourself through, like constant feedback every day, 12 hours a day, every call. Like you're constantly being told you could have done that better, you could have done that better, you could have done that better. And it's
Yeah,
just
the
like it's
postmortems
tough.
after every single call.
Yeah. You just hear your trainer like click clacking. You're like, what did I do now?
And my last trainee that I had at call taking, he was motivated. He was awesome. But over 12 hours, he's pulling 120 calls in.
Yeah.
And this is just the fire medical side, right? So it's like we're not even getting we're the secondary piece out.
These calls have been transferred to us.
I was like, wow, dude, like
Yeah.
slow down a little bit, but I didn't want to discourage him.
Yeah, heck yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. Oh man. Well, you have, and what I told everyone that you might look familiar if they're watching us via video. You've gained quite a following. I think TikTok might be the biggest following.
Yeah.
It's where I follow you mostly. Creating videos about the realities of a dispatcher. And you told us a little bit about your video production past. Tell us kind of how you've molded those two realities for you into promoting dispatch.
So yeah, it was something that I realized I missed the creative side of things. I've always been creative. I was in bands growing up, and I love drawing and painting and things like that. And I was in theater in high school because I'm a dork and all of those things, right? But I I really missed being creative. So at first, when I jumped in, my focus was on learning and getting better and all of that. I didn't realize I was missing that part of my life.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, once I got comfortable, felt like I kind of knew what I was doing. I was like, man, I never get a chance to edit anymore and film anything and all of that. And editing really was my first love in terms of like the creative side of video, telling stories and all of that. And I remember at the time I was scrolling through TikTok at work because that's what we do. And I came across Fire Department Chronicles.
Yes,
And they are absolutely hilarious.
they
And
are.
his real life, things I've experienced on calls as a paramedic, his series that he does that. And they made me laugh so hard. And I thought, what if we told the story from the dispatch side? I never know what I'm seeing. I'm just
Mhm.
hearing, and people say really, really interesting things to us, to be kind.
No, for
And
real.
so I thought, you know what, let's give it a try. And I thought back on some of the weirder calls I had taken in the past couple of years. And I scripted them out super simple. And I shot a test just sitting in my living room against a blank wall. And I put it in and cut it real quick. And I was making myself laugh. And I was like, okay, that's a good sign. Because and you do the podcast, no one likes hearing their own voice. No one likes to
No.
see themselves on camera.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
but I was like, if I'm making myself laugh, this is good. So I
Mhm.
showed my wife, and she was like, this is pretty funny. So I just started the TikTok page, Dispatch It, all one word. And
Mhm.
then I didn't really think it through, because then I didn't get my Instagram one's different, handle is different than that. And
The pains of learning social media.
right, I'm like, gosh, I should know better. I grew up with this stuff. This stuff evolved as I kept growing up.
Exactly.
But I never did. I did it for fun. For me, it was
Mhm.
a release. And
Yeah.
so to get to tell those funny stories and me to be goofy and do voices, and just hopefully other dispatchers and first responders and EMS people, nurses and doctors who are seeing this, hopefully it gives them a little catharsis too, that at every step of the way in an emergency, we're experiencing these weird things, whether it's the
Yeah.
call or the guys showing up on scene, the police or the firefighters or the medics, or
Mhm.
once they get to the hospital, they're doing the same stuff.
Yeah. No, genuinely. And it's so funny because, we talk about, acknowledging and recognizing like every part of this chain, because we really are working in tandem, to deal with people's crisis, whether it's a medical emergency, a mental health crisis. We are literally, okay, this is out of our depth now. We have stabilized. We got to hand it off to you. And then we're going to hand it off to you. And we all have to work together, and we all deal with like these struggles and these hilarious moments that you're just like, what am I doing here?
And it's that you can't it's that skill of someone says something like the most absurd thing to you you think you've ever heard, and you're not trying so hard not to laugh. And
Yes.
I say this with the caveat of, I'm never trying to make fun of the person on the other end of the phone. I think you also said,
Mhm.
give the people on the other end of the phone grace. My call taking trainer also helped teach in the academy, and that was one of the things he said was give them grace. They didn't call
Mhm.
911 because they wanted to. They called
Mhm.
911 because they feel they needed the help. And
Mhm.
whether or not you think that help might be unnecessary is beside the point. We just need to provide that service. And then after you get off the phone, then we can talk about it and maybe
Yeah.
giggle a
Yeah.
little bit and use that as a stress relief. And that's kind of where
Mhm.
the dispatch it videos came in for me. It was a
Mhm.
stress relief. It was a way for me to be creative. It was a way for me to kind of process some of the strange stuff that we hear, because
Yeah.
we hear anything and everything. And it also allows me to focus more on kind of the funny aspects of this job rather than the more tragic ones that we're all going to have to go through.
And it's true. I mean, I know everyone who answers 911 lives in a world where, like, what if we could just respond the way we want to? Like matching the energy and all that. And obviously that's not productive when you're dealing with folks who are in crisis or who believe they're in a crisis, really aren't in a crisis, so on and so forth. But finding a way to educate the public with humor so the public knows, like, yes, people call for this. And maybe this wasn't a valid reason to call, but they did. So, like, it's kind of an indirect way of educating people on the reason to use 911.
Yeah, I agree. And that's actually, as I was doing these, suddenly I thought, okay, so the content I'm making is aimed at, clearly it's inside baseball. It is aimed at people mostly who kind of understand the system.
Yeah.
And then I started a secondary series within Dispatch It, and I've got a couple episodes on there called How to 911. And I still wanted to keep it fun and tongue in cheek. And I kind of make fun of the absurdities of that, but how to 911, location being number one. That was, I think, my first episode of that. Location, location, location. You have to know where you are. Otherwise, we can't help you. And then I kind of on from there. And I thought maybe this would be a cool way to kind of educate the public who aren't in this world to know, why do I ask you so many questions? Well, I'm required to. I'm also getting this information and passing it on to the first responders who are en route to you. So this is all helpful. I don't slow help down, things like that. I still wanted to keep them fun and light and silly, which I think I've done a pretty good job of. But hopefully someone watching that, even if one person does, when they have to call, they'll be like, oh, that's why this happens. That's why this goes.
Exactly. One of my big things that I push recently is, like, know your non-emergency numbers and, like, know how to report where you spend your time. If whether it's a city you work in, the city you live in, a city you're planning to travel to, do the research and know how to report, because when and if you do need to utilize services and 911 isn't the right place to go, you have all those numbers and information pre-saved in your phone. A lot of people are like, well, we don't have non-emergency numbers. And I'm like, well, do you actually not have non-emergency numbers, or do we just not know of the non-emergency numbers? Like, I don't know. You got to do your own research for where you live. But if 911's the only option for you, like, yeah, of course, utilize 911. But if you do have a non-emergency number, please save it in your phone. Please utilize it. Because I do think there's a lack of understanding for the everyday citizen. When we say you're tying up a 911 line, it's literally tying up. Like, I have 4 911 slots at my agency, and my previous agency, we had 35. So it looked a little different. But at my current agency, if you're tying up a 911 line, you are literally blocking someone else from being able to utilize it if all of those lines are tied up. So just having that knowledge, that simple knowledge for folks, is kind of hard to understand, because our technology in 911, like, we're still trying to get NG 911 nationwide. I mean, we're so behind technology wise, as an industry, that people have a hard time understanding that. Like, what do you mean you don't know where I am? What do you mean that you only have 4 911 lines? Like, people have a hard time grasping that because of all the technology we have in the palm of our hands.
Of course. Yeah, that's interesting to say that. And on the flip side of that is, if you're actually having an emergency, don't call the business line. And you've gotten it too, right? Yeah. You're like, whoa, okay. Yeah. And they're like, well, don't you have my address on the screen? No, you did not call 911. I have nothing. And so there's that. But yeah, knowing that and knowing when, because I mean, so I'm in California, and we have to call CHP, the traffic collision on the freeway or something, and make sure that they're going. And I can tell they are inundated because I get the hold message. And people don't understand, wait, there's a hold message for 911? Yeah. When we break a vegetation fire and everyone wants to call us to report it, we're like, yeah, we know.
Do you guys have reports of the smoke and the yes, they know I'm not transferring you.
Yeah.
They're gonna yell at me
Initial
if I
attack
transfer
was
one more
2
call.
hours ago. We're aware that this exists.
I don't see any fire trucks. You guys got to get the big fire trucks out
Yeah.
here.
Are you sure you know it? Are you sure? I think this one's different. And I'm like, "Oh, okay. So so that's when we have those really large incidences when we'll get inundated and just the phones go off the hook. Or 4th of July, people reporting fireworks. We're like, anyone hurt? No. Anything on fire? Okay.
Yeah, right. Like, did something blow off or is something on fire? Like, come on.
So yeah,
Man.
it's that the public education I think is a big key, and I think it is interesting. And now being on the inside of it, you don't realize that like the 911 system when it was created, it hasn't really been upgraded in decades.
Yeah.
And so the
Legit.
push to next gen 911 is going to be good, but it's going to take a minute.
It's going to be painful, especially for smaller cities, rural areas. Like this tech, I mean, it's basic, but it's just the foundation is not there. So it's going to take some pain.
And you're like the smaller departments that don't have maybe a full-time IT person. How are you gonna navigate that when you're on night shift on a Saturday and something stops working?
Yeah, no, legit. Like I've been to some of these centers in like Nebraska or like one-person centers, and they're due in jail and walking at the walk-up window and like ants. I'm like, this is insane.
Yeah.
Like it never. Shout out to you one-person centers out there who are doing it all. It's tough, and the technology.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah. Could you imagine? Like I'm annoyed in a 2-person center. Like I can't imagine being in a one, like having to call one of my officers and like, hey, can you just hang out here real quick while I use the restroom? Like,
Right.
Awkward.
I need a minute.
Right. If it's not this red line, just put everything else on hold. Thank you. Okay, well, you're a theater guy, so I have to ask you this question.
Okay.
Have you seen Wicked?
Not the movie. I've seen Wicked twice at the Pantages in LA.
Okay.
And that was phenomenal.
Yes.
I haven't had a chance to make it to the theater yet.
Okay, my fiance made me go twice so far. She loves it. Wicked's her favorite. We have season tickets for Broadway out here in the Bay. So we got to see it when it just came through right before the movie. But yeah, I was gonna be like, does it hold up? Because she really enjoyed the movie as well. She thought they did a really good job.
I've heard nothing but good things, but the funny thing that I heard, I didn't realize it was part 1.
Yeah, it's freaking part 1. Which is wild if you've seen the play, because you're like, we got through that whole thing in the play, but we only got through part 1 in the movie.
So I'm like, what, does this just take us to intermission? Like, so now I'm even more curious to go see it, but I have heard good things.
It does take us to intermission, my friend. It does. Yes.
That's good.
Okay, and my second question is, since you've been, dabbling into, the voice acting and the scripting, the acting part, do we see an acting career coming in for your next shift?
I mean, I wouldn't turn it down. I enjoy doing that. Like, I'd love to get into voice work. It's something I've always just enjoyed doing. It's super fun. Cool. And the cool thing about being in dispatch is you really hone your voice.
That's true. Yeah.
Every day. And, it's just one of those things I've always enjoyed. So I think that's part of the reason I like dispatching too, is because your only tool with these callers is your voice. So do you need to, as when I was training, I remember one of my, Malia, who was training me for the day, and she got on me a little bit because I was letting some callers walk over me a little bit, and she goes, "Hey, you got kids, right? Use your dad voice." And for whatever reason, that clicked with me. I was like, okay, but it's also knowing, okay, great, I use my dad voice. I was kind of firm for a minute. Now I got to pull back now that they're listening, and I got to be that caring, compassionate voice. The funny thing to me is when we have our law enforcement partners stay on the line with us because they're still not sure what's going on and they're
Yeah,
not sure
yeah,
if they might
yeah.
be needed, and
Like,
they're hanging out
"Come on,
listening.
boy."
Yeah, and then they get that caller who just starts being a total jerk.
Yeah.
And then they jump in and I'm like, well, you could be a little more mean than I can. I have to be nice.
We do got a little freedom on the law enforcement side that I
Yeah.
think.
I'm like, wow, that's kind of cool. Like I have to be super chill.
That's hilarious. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I had to tell someone to go to bed the other day. It literally was like, it's 4 a.m. Go to sleep.
Right. Oh
And
man.
sometimes you gotta hit people with that because one thing, we're not here to be like harassed or
Correct.
treated poorly just for the sake of being treated poorly. Like that's
Yeah.
not what we're doing here as dispatchers. Like, we're gonna give you grace. You're in the middle of emergency, like you're gonna be escalated. All those things are true and valid, and we need to, leave space for that. But then there's people who are just mean for the sake of being mean. And, we're allowed to set some boundaries there professionally, of
Of
course,
course.
but we're allowed to set boundaries. So if you're thinking about getting in this line of work, know that it's an art.
Oh, it
it's,
is.
it's
And
an
there's a
art, but
difference, right? There's a difference between someone cursing at me because they are
Mhm.
in a full-blown panic
Yeah,
versus someone cursing at me and it's just mean-spirited or it's
yeah.
really targeted and directed. And
Mhm.
so I can let the panic people, I can let that slide all day long.
Yeah,
That's water off my, just rolls right
yeah,
off my back. I'm done. I'm
yeah,
good.
yeah.
But I had a funny call the other day where this guy, he kept calling and then he'd disappear when the medics would get there, and then he'd call
Mhm.
again and then he'd disappear. And then finally I was like, hey, we're out looking for you. Where are you? And he just started cursing me out. F you, F you, F this, F that, whatever. And whoa. So, but at this point, we know he had been calling a little bit. And I was like, hey, just trying to get you help. And he's like, F you. And I go, it's generally not a good idea to curse at someone who's trying to help you.
In my experience.
Yeah. But it worked because I kept him on the phone long enough to where the guys could pinpoint him.
Yeah, they can see the guy yelling "F you" on the corner, like, "That's him, that's him."
Okay.
He's
Hey
yelling
guys,
at Mark right
go
now.
2 blocks over. I can see him. I can see him on rapid deploy.
Yeah.
We're good.
Oh my gosh. Well, you just recently did a presentation at CalAPCO, and for folks who are not familiar with, I don't know what technically to call our boards or governing organizations, APCO and NINA are two of those organizations that you could become members of and go to their conferences and learn from and present at. And you chose to go to CalAPCO, which is the state conference held by APCO. And he did a presentation focused on humor, on using humor and hobbies to combat burnout. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what was your strategies from that presentation?
It's funny. I was our manager sent out an email and said, "Hey, if anyone's interested in presenting." And lo and behold, I was the only one in my center who said, "Yeah, that sounds
Who would have
cool." And but then it was, "Oh, I have to come up with something. What would I present on? What is my area of expertise?" And I look at it like I'm 5 years in, five and a
thought?
half. And I'm like, what can I teach some of these people who are 20, 30 years in? Where,
Preach, preach.
and then, right? And then suddenly I've got this imposter syndrome going on. And I'm like,
Mhm,
oh boy, here we go.
mhm,
And I, I was thinking about it. Well, what are the things that I do? And Dispatch It had been pretty established by then. And I thought, well, I use that to help me process these calls. And I
mhm.
enjoy making people laugh, and humor is good for you. And then I said, my hobby is making these stupid videos for the internet. And I thought, well, let's do some research. So I started doing some research on how humor can help with stress and as a stress reliever. But I also
Mhm,
then went, we in the first responders, us first responders have a really dark sense of humor, typically.
Really dark.
It's kind of hard to avoid it. You could say it's never going to happen to me, and then a year in, you're going to be just you're going to be down,
questionable, you know.
Yeah. You're going to be laughing at things, and then you're going to question yourself afterwards.
Yes.
But then I thought, well, is that a problem? Is that a bad thing? So I started doing some research into dark humor, and is dark humor a sign of an issue, or is it actually an acceptable thing? And then I found out that no, dark humor is totally fine within reason. And then that got me to the part where it's okay, time and place. So I broke the presentation up into 5 sections. And the first section, I got my little cheat sheet here so I didn't forget. First section was humor is a coping mechanism. Is it healthy? And then next was dark humor. Is something wrong with me? Too soon. And then how to recognize when a joke's gone too far. And then I transitioned from there into hobbies. And then so hobbies and burnout. How do hobbies help prevent or combat burnout? And then the last section is called So Much Room for Activities, finding the hobby that's right for you.
Amazing.
So I wrote this whole thing up. I did a ton of research. I sent my paper in, and then they said, sorry, we're full. So I had my whole outline. I didn't build my deck. I didn't build my presentation fully. Yeah. But I had my outline done and everything. And I thought, okay, maybe I can do this again in the future. And I went about my business, and I promoted. I took the supervisor test, and I got on the list, and I was just waiting to get promoted. And then 2 weeks before CalAPCO, and this was in Orange County this year, it was the Southern one, hosted it. And I get a call. Hey, so we had a last minute dropout. Are you still interested in presenting? And I went, yeah, that sounds great.
I don't know. I got to make my slide deck.
So then I went, oh no. So I had 2 weeks to put it together. And again, that imposter syndrome creeped right back up. Just dove right in there. And I went, oh my gosh. So, but I built it out. I used a lot of the videos that I create as kind of segues.
Yeah.
To show that, yeah, it's okay to laugh. It's okay. And then I went for it and presented it, and I went way too fast, which I knew I was going to do. So that was my first time.
So true.
And I knew it. I'm like, I'm going to go too fast. I need to slow down. I'm going to go too fast. And then I went too fast. So I'm really hoping to be able to do it again. I put in for CalNina. I think they're like near LAX or whatever in March.
Yes.
And so I'm hoping to hear back from them soon. And then the Western States APCO, I put in for that one as well. And I'm hoping I can continue to kind of grow that. I really, really enjoyed it. And I think during APCO, I took a course on imposter syndrome that was put on by one of the other presenters. And I did it the day before my presentation.
Awesome.
And it really, really helped. It sunk in really well. And I felt like I did a really good job of the presentation. I really, really enjoyed doing it. And I thought maybe I can continue to grow this side of things for me and help others in dispatch and other first responders find ways to cope and realize that it's okay to laugh at certain things or to have a certain sense of humor. And for those of us who are working nonstop, my center, we've been short-staffed, like most centers. We've been short-staffed for a long time now. And so we're pulling, massive amounts of overtime, and it's forced or mandated depending on the department you work for. And you're there all the time and you're missing your family. So how do we in a healthy way, manage the burnout, manage the stress, so that when you're home with your family and friends and other loved ones, that you don't bring that with you and you don't let it, first damage you in terms of just a depression or feeling just completely burnt out and lost. And you don't allow that to seep into your relationships at home. so you can protect them, and that can be your safe space, your sanctuary.
No, I mean, I think this is a great presentation. For folks who are thinking about presenting at a local conference or a national conference even, you do not need to have your slide deck ready to submit that presentation. So like Josh did, just put your ideas on paper into the format they're wanting it in and submit it. Submit it, because this job is so unique, right? Like, no one who is outside of this job who has not worked as a dispatcher is going to be able to best teach and educate dispatchers. Like, they exist. There are people who come in and they have valuable information, but there's something so special about learning from each other, because what Josh experiences at work, I experience at work, and we're on two different sides of dispatching. You're fire, I'm law enforcement, and we still have commonalities. So if you're sitting there going, I don't know what I could teach people, I've only been doing this for X amount of time, like, you, from the moment you started doing dispatch, you have learned, and you can teach whatever it is that you've learned to other dispatchers who are looking for inspiration 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years in, because we do get in the cycle of working and dealing with and not learning from each other. Kind of hinders our ability to do this job better.
Yeah, I agree. And you think about it, like what I did, because then I was like, oh, I'm committed now. I have to do this, But what I did is I just took what I was interested in, what was true to me. And, I was able to use my life experiences, whether or not they came from dispatch, and apply them to that, and then present it in a way that hopefully it helps some people. And the feedback I've gotten so far was really, really positive. And then I went out right after, and I got the book Talk Like TED, about some of the best TED speakers. And how they craft their presentations. And then I instantly started taking notes. And because I'm really hopeful to do this and other presentations. So I'm like, all right, now how do I do this better? Yeah. And it really inspired me, which is another thing. Like, so this my thing was about preventing burnout, and this actually doing the presentation really kind of stoked some new life into me too. And it was fun. Fun aside about that, I got the book and I was sitting there reading it on the couch, and I had a notebook next to me, and I'm writing stuff down as it occurred to me. And like, either, oh yeah, let's add that in. I can put a new, add this into my presentation, or, oh, I need to do this more. Yeah. And my 15-year-old comes up to me and he's like, are you taking notes? I'm like, yeah. He's like, why? Are you doing a class? Like, no.
This is what learning looks like.
I'm like, you don't.
Are you not doing this in school?
And he's a straight A student. I'm like, come on, kid.
Like, show off. You don't got to take notes.
Yeah, geez, dude. So.
That is funny. Yeah, I think one thing that props to your manager as well, taking that opportunity and pushing it out to everyone in dispatch, because if you are not invested in dispatching outside of your job, like certifications, or like knowing about these organizations and knowing their state conferences, like, you might have a very narrow lens of what's out there for you. So the fact that the manager saw this opportunity and put it out to other people, like, hey, like, this is something exciting, because we have limited options in dispatch, right? There's a limited amount of supervisor roles. There's a limited amount of lead roles. Some centers might have a tactical dispatch option. Some centers might let you join the CSI team, but the ability to do other things that excite you in your role, like, those are limited for us. So managers who look for those opportunities and give them to their people, I think, is commendable. I think it helps with burnout as well, giving you something else to pour into.
Yeah, and we've been on a hiring binge for a couple of years now, really.
Yeah.
But as we start to, we're slowly getting to more manageable levels, and I
Mhm.
know what we're trying to do, and I highly recommend it to anyone who's able to, is take classes or go to conferences, even if you're not
Mhm.
intending on speaking.
Yeah. Heck
Getting
yeah.
to network with some other people and meet some people from different centers is always, I mean, at least for me, I'm an extrovert, but it's fun. And I
Mhm.
like to kind of hear the commonalities and the differences and talk
Yeah.
about what's going on with them. But then sitting in these courses or these classes, these breakout sessions was really cool. I did a 2-day like accountability and leadership and management versus coaching, or leadership versus coaching,
Mm.
um, through Chief Leadership.
Mm.
Shout out to Charlie at Chief Leadership. He did, and it was really, really cool.
Yeah.
I went in there. I got the opportunity, obviously, because it was put out to our supervisors group, and I hadn't
Mhm.
technically promoted yet by that point. But knowing that I was just waiting for the date to hit,
Mhm.
I got to go to this, and I came away feeling like I learned a lot, and it
Mhm.
gave me that boost of confidence I know I need going into this new leadership role.
Mhm.
But it also it did a couple things for me. One, it got me out of the center for a day or two.
Yeah.
So there's that, break up kind of the monotony, but then you come back with some new ideas, and then you're able to share them with others on your shift,
Yeah.
and put those things into practice and actually see them work and actually
Mhm.
see yourself improve.
Mhm.
It's going to continue to make you um, better. Like I look at dispatching too is a little different than, say, the guys in the field, whether they be the medics, the firefighters, or the police officers. They have to deal with a certain level of monotony and sameness, but they're out on patrol, they're out and about, they're getting to experience things. We in dispatch, we don't leave the center, and
Yeah.
sometimes I don't see sunlight. And so,
Seriously.
so it's nice to be able to get out and do those things and break up the the normal pattern of things.
Mhm, mhm. It's true, and whenever I go to a conference, even before I was attending as, like, the Raspy Dispatcher and all that nonsense, is there's just such a level of refreshment that comes with it, and inspiration, and you just feel revitalized, and re-inspired, to bring this information back to your center and be able to make change, or offer opinions to hopefully influence change. It really does go a long way to making this job a little more sustainable.
Yeah, and I think it can keep you from getting jaded as well.
Yeah.
Um, and that's easy in any line of work to get there after a long period of time, but ours can really bring you down, whether it's policies and forced overtime and all these other things
Mhm.
like that coming down from executive management that you're like, what the heck is this?
Yeah.
But you're right, it gives you that feeling of empowerment where you're like, hey, I just went to this, I can present this information back to you and hopefully affect some
Mhm.
type of change.
Heck yeah. Well, you are stepping into a new role as a supervisor, which is a huge shift, right? From being one of the guys to having to be in a management role. How are you intending to, or how have you already started fostering an environment that allows your people, to stay human and process these emotions, and all while maintaining their resilience during this tough job?
So it's interesting because I've thought a lot about that. Like, okay, now I'm on this side of it. I've
Mhm.
always enjoyed being in kind of leadership roles, just throughout as far back as I can remember, to be perfectly honest, whether it was on a sports team or,
Yeah.
within my, my bands and theater stuff and all those other things, right? I enjoyed that. I liked being in that position. I felt like I did it well, but now I'm like, oh, this is real now, because now we're dealing with um, some pretty heavy stuff sometimes, real
Mhm.
emergencies. Everything has to work. We can't, when an emergency breaks, we all have to buckle down and do our job.
Yeah.
Uh, but then you're right, the human factor comes into play. What if everyone has their triggers in this job, right?
Yeah.
And you never know. Sometimes you don't even know it's going to trigger you until it does.
Mhm.
So I've thought a lot about that. And as I've been shadowing these past couple of weeks, and I officially go into my new slot on tomorrow.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah,
Awesome.
so I've been running the show, but I've had my, another seasoned supervisor kind of watching my back, making sure I don't screw things up. But I've thought about it. One of the big things, and this is something I've even enacted when I was training, in a lot of emergency services. When you're a rookie, there are certain duties that are expected of you, and you are low on the totem pole, and you're expected to do certain chores and this and that and the other thing. You can't have your phone on you, all these things, right?
Yeah.
And so I've thought about it though, and I said, hey, look, this is how I've always looked at it. I appreciate that you're willing to put in that extra work, but we're all adults here. If you have a reason, if you need to talk to me. If you need to go make a phone call, go make a phone call. If you need to go, if you need to get up, if you're ever having, if anything ever feels like it's kind of getting to you, just let me know. We are in this together. Yes, you are a rookie, but you are also a human being. And we're all grown people, and we need to treat each other with respect. So now moving into that supervisor position, I'm dealing with, and on my shift, because now I've got most of the, kind of the newer dispatchers. We're great, by the way. They're solid. They're hungry. They're smart. They know what they're doing. So I'm really excited about my shift because I already know I can trust them. But that being said, I want to make sure that I foster that, like, you're well trained. I trust you. But if you have questions, please come ask me. And if you need something, I'm here for you. That's part of this. I need to make sure that, of course, the center runs and we're answering our calls within the mandated time, and we're dispatching to every emergency. And when we have big incidents, that everything's running smoothly, everyone's doing their job, nothing's being slipping through the cracks. But I trust my team.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing that I've had really good supervisors and managers over the years who do that. And then I've had the opposite. We all have. And so I think I've learned enough in my 41 years on this earth to know where and when it's appropriate to have to maybe crack down a little bit, but also do that with respect. But at the same time, we're all adults. And that's always something I come back to. We're adults. You guys I expect you to have things outside of dispatch. And if something comes up, please tell me. We're good.
Yeah. Let me help.
Right? I'm here to help, even if you don't want to get specific, but if you need a minute, I'm here for that. And I don't anticipate, too many issues in terms of behavioral things, but if I do, I know I'll be able to combat it with, like you said, with grace. Just like we treat our callers with grace, we need to treat our coworkers or our subordinates or our management with grace as well. Like, hey, everyone's got something going on. So if this is out of the ordinary, maybe don't jump to conclusions. Maybe don't crack the whip so hard. Maybe say, hey, you good? Do you need to talk? We can go in another room, things like that to foster a really, I trust them. And I want them to be able to trust me. So I know it's on me to be able to lay the groundwork for that trust going forward.
Amazing. It sounds wonderful. Genuinely, I think most people understand supervisors kind of have a tough job because when, things go wrong, they're the ones you talk to. But, supervisors, we also need to be intentional. Yeah, or not we, because I'm not a supervisor, but supervisors need to be intentional about creating those relationships outside of, coaching or conduct or, write-ups. I want to know, like, every time that I talk to Josh, it's not because I'm getting in trouble.
Right.
Oh, man. Well, this has been amazing. I'm so happy that you decided to come on to the podcast and share your experiences and your awesome presentation that I know is only going to grow. But one of the things that I ask everyone at the end of my episode is, what advice would you give someone who is considering a career in dispatch?
Ooh. Let me think on that for a second, because actually, here's my advice, and this is something that most centers will allow you to do, is if you think dispatch might be something that you're interested in, do a sit along. Um, it's something that we have people who are, hey, I really want to do this. I had someone coming in tomorrow for one. I know at my center, what we try to do is sit you with a call taker for a little bit. You get to talk to someone, you get to hear the calls, you're jacked in, you can hear them, you get to see what you're getting yourself into. And then you can talk to the dispatchers and learn about their life, how they manage it, how it is, especially if you're coming from a traditional 9 to 5, if you're not used to that shift work. Getting in there and being able to talk to them about how does the schedule work? What are the pros and cons of it? Because there are cool things about shift work. I can have a Wednesday off and go do something, and no one else is doing anything because so there's definite pros. And then the cons are you have to work. You might miss certain family engagements. I've had to miss a bunch of sporting events for my kids over the years, which is a bummer. But the good outweighs the bad in the end. But if you go and do this sit along, you might be able to make a more informed decision before you dive in all the way. And then you might feel trapped. Over the years, we've had people who their first night shift, they put and right after their first night shift, they put in their 2 weeks. They're like, I'm out, I'm done. And they resigned. So having a little bit of knowledge of that and getting to speak with dispatchers who've done the job for a while, or even the new dispatchers who are just on, they can talk to you about the challenges of what to learn, but also what the benefits are and how the department is and how they're going to treat you and train you and everything else. That'll get you a leg up as you go into as you try to apply at different centers.
Amazing advice. Do a sit along. I agree. And Josh, thank you so much for coming onto the show and all of your amazing videos that you're putting out there, highlighting the realities of this job, but making us laugh while you do it. I really appreciate it and enjoy it.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed this immensely.
Awesome. I'll be right back with you. All right, everybody, that was another amazing episode here on Let's Talk Dispatch. I will include all the links to follow Josh and Dispatch It on their socials in the information tab of this episode. Genuinely, take a look at the things that you enjoy doing outside of dispatch and ask yourself, how can I implement this into 911? Josh is making these amazing videos that make us laugh and highlight this tough job. I've had folks on here who have written children's books, and the list goes on and on. So take a moment to check in with yourself, figure out if you need a little extra help to shake off that burnout and those mandated hours, and see how your hobbies and your humor can help you do that. Until next time, everybody, stay raspy. Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Dispatch podcast. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're interested in becoming a guest on the show, or maybe even submitting your own story, you can do all that and more at theraspydispatcher.com. Until next time, stay raspy.